especially ones that don't have big healing, such as Priest, you hit a early game damage threshold, and that number varies a little bit, but if you can put out a ton of damage in the first 3 to 4 turns, your game plan like transitions to a very simple one, which is almost ignore everything about the game apart from going face. So like that even includes like good trades on board. You can just ignore them if your hand's looking in the right shape. But let's just dive straight in. Not a bad opening at all from Frenetic. The only thing I found recently though, that Felmore in matchups like this feels just a little bit slow, because you said, what does Warrior do turns 1, 2, 3? Well, yeah. Frenetic's Felmore is going to become live when xBlyzes deck becomes live, so it doesn't quite have the impact in this matchup.
And crucially, xBlyzes does have the Blademaster Samuro here, which is absolutely the answer he is going to want to this board, because no matter what comes down here now from Frenetic, xBlyzes is going to be able to clear it up with Coin Samuro on the following turn, which also then sticks a minion in play to interrupt with the Felmore as it wakes up on the following turn.
Sorry about that. I'm just choking at how dangerous this Samuro is. I was going to say the conditioning was huge as well, right? Because the Samuro on this board, like you could be okay, that's bad, but something lives. Whereas this, like the 2-attack Samuro is brutal. But I do like what Frenetic's done, even though this plays into it. I think this is 100% the correct decision outside of Samuro. And if this wasn't exactly Samuro here, Frenetic would have just dealt too much damage this game. Goes into Wrangler, goes into Rhino, GG. So xBlyzes has done, task 1. He isn't just dead yet, but there's still plenty more to go.
It went face. Yeah, crucially, that does not in any way end the game. Like, the damage is still coming thick and fast here as far as xBlyzes is concerned, so he does need to restabilize from this point. But he does have a good hand to do that with for the rest of the game. He hates, I'm sure, the fact that this 5-4 gets to attack again. That's usually not a situation you're very keen on surviving as the Warrior. This is so much damage going through, but if he can just get there with Kresh, there is potential that he can stabilize with enough armor here.
Don't you just love, how can people dislike Hunter? Look at this gameplay. Like, it's perfect. Rinling's a big deal, actually.
They're all a little bit slow, right? There's nothing that he can play immediately this turn while hero powering, which I think has just become mandatory overall.
But that's why I like Rinling.
Yeah.
Because it pays off in the long term, right? He's
Lines
gonna
up
go
for next turn.
Yeah, Ringling face Arcane Shot the 7-1. Go for a freezing trap.
There's no way you Arcane Shot the 7-1, do you?
Oh, well, it's because it depends on the secret, right? I think if you don't get freezing, you do. Sorry, you don't. No, sorry, you don't. You don't. If you don't get freezing, you don't. If you do get freezing, you do.
Why?
Because it opens up just more damage going forward, right?
I'm so confused. Okay. Well, either way, xBlyzes is not going to be able to find the answers he needs, and Frenetic is going to pick up a fast victory there with the Face Hunter, and I do mean fast in every sense of the word. Having just checked the ladder stats, it actually has it favored on ladder the other way, ever so slightly for the Rush Warrior, which is surprising that we have it swung so hard. It's not a tiny sample size, right, for the Warrior going that way around that we have in GM. But it's a very, very poor matchup overall. But Frenetic is picking up what seems to be the GM side of the matchup here, really making it look easy. xBlyzes had the best possible response he could really have to that situation, was not able to get there in the end.
Yeah, it really did. Although xBlyzes had the response to keep him alive for now, Frenetic had the answer, which was the Wrangler into Rhino and just the damage, right? Because you've got to think, after that clear, one, it helped the Felmore just went face twice in that game, which is ridiculous, of course. But after that clear, if Frenetic just had a few spells, then suddenly the game doesn't look as strong, right? Because he doesn't have that minion pressure, and like the Rhino living, for example, after its trade means it has to be killed. So it really was just the correct curve of pressure you want, even though there was the response. But moving swiftly on, we are going to get the Warrior again from xBlyzes, and Frenetic's going to be on this Token Druid once more.
Before we move on completely, apology. There is so much to cover, and these two players do not give us any time in which to cover it, but just to cover that interaction towards the end. Blaze went for a very smart play, which was to play his minion and then attack face. That looks weird in that spot, right, when he was on 5 health or whatever it was. Firstly, attacking into the minion a lot of the time doesn't do anything because of pack tactics. Freezing trap means the trade can't happen anyway. What he gave himself was an explosive trap out, right? Which was available from Frenetic, but he smartly dodged it.
Yes.
Because explosive trap looks like a reasonable pick there, right? It kills a 7-1, which might be something you want to do. But because of the frenzy effect on Kresh, that would have immediately then gained Blaze a bunch of armor. So that's what he was trying to do at the very end of the game. Frenetic dodged falling into the trap.
And even getting away from the 7-1, the explosive trap's tempting because it deals 2 to face, right? Like, it's just that more face damage. But yeah, completely right. Good play around Kresh there, and a good spot from Blaze to play into that as well. But already, the players are on turn 2 of this game, so we have no time to chat. As Frenetic is, I imagine, just eyeing up what he can do with Gibbling so far.
He just has it again. Just Gibbling Fungal Fortunes Glowfly Swarm. He just has it again. That's all there is to say. He just has the cards.
Oh, Blade Master, okay. Good pickup here from Blaze. We'll be looking for some kind of buff to really make it stick, though. And now okay. With that Soul of the Forest...
Not going to play... Oh, I guess it all just plays on curve on the following turn. My mistake. Yeah, don't worry.
With the Soul of the Forest, Frenetic does have the option to play into the late game really well, because even the Rush minions can't really take down a big board that has been Soul of the Forest.
Is that the other one? That's
no. Insane. Well,
oh, that's disgusting.
Oh my, oh my.
Yeah.
Is he going to play Soul here?
I think so, right?
Yeah,
like with the blooms and everything else, he can pump up to a pretty spectacular looking Soul of the Forest.
Well, can he just use 1 bloom and then have Bloom Arbor next turn?
So what would you do? Bloom back up to 5?
Yeah, I wondered if you could play like the second Gibbling and use only 1 bloom instead.
Okay. He's going to go Solar Arbor.
Oh, okay,
actually, instead of the Soul of the Forest, which is not something I was looking at. That's extremely all in. He gets himself a board of 3 health minions, having just seen 1 3-attack Blade Master Samuro. Surprise, my dude! I've got a second one. That's just unlucky. It's just unlucky. There is nothing else that really can be added to that. The play's fine. It's perfectly reasonable. That's just unlucky.
Here for a good time.
I cringed watching it because that was painful to see.
Yep.
Back-to-back buffed Samuros. Like, what is Frenetic even supposed to do? Nothing.
Lose.
Lose, yes.
Yeah.
Hey, that's funny.
That is a fairly amusing end to proceedings, yes.
And sometimes you just get got. And there's just nothing to do here. You can't really deal with this. With the double Samuro, I mean, it's just game over. Along the lines of, not only is this board cleared, but well, he's just dead next turn, right? He can't keep up with this, can't really defend against it. And I think this might be onto a very quick game number 3, Sottle.
I concede.
Indeed.
Yep, there we go.
It's always weird to hear, like, there was a Blitzchung interview, right, where he said, you know, people overlook Token Druid, and I really feel like there's a lot of skill expression and different things that you can do and so on. And, like, obviously the Druid didn't just run away with the game, but I still feel like it's the Druid that creates that dynamic, right, where it's like, I'm going to see if I draw my cards, and then you have to see if you draw your cards. And that's basically what a Druid matchup comes down to, and that's kind of what we saw in that position, with not one but two Blade Master Samaros having to come down to pick this board apart.
Yeah, it is honestly just the ultimate linear deck, right? It does this one thing, it tries to do this exact thing, and there's just little to no flexibility with that choice, right? It's like, yeah, okay, sometimes you play Soul of the Forest, sometimes you play Arbor up. Like, was Frenetic going to win that game if he went Soul instead? I still don't think so, because Samuro number 2 would have cleared the death rattle. Would have popped all the death rattles, and then the minions would have cleared, what, 4 more of them off the board, and then that's just done. So I think there's just certain turns that you cannot recover from, and that was one of the most disgusting ones I've ever seen. Like, buff Samuro into buff Samuro was, oh.
Yeah, the interesting line to look at is the kind of thing you were talking about, right? Where you do just go one bloom and still leave yourself with Arbor Up potential. You still leave yourself with Solar Arbor Up potential, right, later on in the game. Because even then, you talk about that situation where second Samurai comes down and clears up, which is obviously a ridiculous nonsense one-outer that you shouldn't even really be considering playing around. But if you want to talk about that particular instance of that game, was it winnable? Then you have to kind of get into that idea of just playing Soul of the Forest, because even if you just protect 3 minions after the fact, right, or whatever it would end up being after the death rattles got popped and the Samuro came down, that's still a base for you to then land Arbor Up on the following turn, right? And then maybe you can go forward from there. But in reality, I'm not going to fault the play to just say, okay, I mean, we saw the generated Blade Master Samuro, so I'm just going to hope that the second one is not also in the top 10 cards of their deck. I think it's a very reasonable line from that position.
Right.
But we move on. The series is squared up, and Frenetic is going to be back on the Druid here, facing down xBlyzes this time on his OTK Demon Hunter.
Much to answer for.
Yeah, and I mean, again, we've not seen tons of Token Druid in EU, right, for the whole season. It's been like now and again, if that. But I think a lot of the players who actually did bring it earlier just lost before they could make it to stream. Right. But like, how does this matchup normally go? Is this Token Druid favored, or does the Immolation Auras just make up for everything that Demon Hunt has to worry about?
It's tough. Like, I think it's ever so slightly Druid favored, but not by a lot. Like, the AoE is there, but it's limited. There's only a couple of cards that you can freely use for AoE in terms of Immolation Aura. The other card with Fellscreen Blast is 1, limited in the number of minions it hits, and 2, limited in whether or not you're allowed to use them in a particular situation. Because quite often, what you'll see happen in this matchup is that removal pieces will be used, including Fellscreen Blasts, and the Demon Hunter will be, it's fine, like, I've done a little bit of damage this game, I can kill him with an I-Beam. And then the Druid just generates Moon-Touched Amulet or Cenarian Ward or something, right? And goes Solar Eclipse with that to just get out of range of 24, get out of range of 36. And then suddenly there just isn't really enough damage left in the Demon Hunter deck. So it's a very fine balancing act between how much board you need to answer, how risky you can be with your own health, and how much you need to save for combo pieces with the Demon Hunter side.
Okay, well, so far, even just xBlyzes getting hold of that Kurtrus isn't terrible as a stopgap of some removal, right? He's going to be able to deal with a few minions if Frenetic starts to build this board. But there isn't much of a board to build right now, so yeah, I don't mind him just taking this a tad slower.
Exciting game of Hearthstone between our two competitors. Hero pairs back and forth, but Frenetic is probably now looking at a pop-off turn here. Has the ability to get a lot of Soul of the Forest juice down this turn if he really wants to.
I'm looking at what kind of board it can look like with Pride instead.
True. Ooh. I think it's slow. Okay.
Wasn't expecting that.
Oh, Sigil of Flame is so clutch here.
Frenetic does still have that pride, right? So he can give a lot of health to these minions, but of course, Sigil of Flame will lower anything that Frenetic plays this turn, and then makes it easier for the Immolation Aura and such to clean up afterwards.
Yep. Currently no Moargs in hand for xBlyzes in terms of like huge bursts of healing, but he does have the Talented Arcanists to be able to juice up any AoE that comes down. So I think we're going to see Frenetic drop the Soul of the Forest here. Yeah, generate annoying board number 1, which does resist the Sigil on the other side just a little bit as well.
Yeah, going into Skull turn as well, so even if there is the Immolation Aura, it just stops xBlyzes potentially playing that Skull.
Right. Finally gets to play the Arcanist at the very least from the left-hand side of his hand. He is going to dump everything just to get the pretty much full Reno effect. Goes back up to 26 here, clears the board. It's been an awkward hand, honestly, for xBlyzes. We haven't really talked about it too much, but just the left-hand side of this hand being clogged up with the Immolation Aura and the Talented Arcanist, 2 cards that he really, really does not want to use. And there it is. All in one turn now. xBlyzes needs to hit gas now because he will not be able to survive for much longer in this game without giving up crucial combo pieces. So he wants game-ending combo pieces right now. All right, 3-mana second Skull is close to that.
Frenetic again can just pop off here, right? He has Gibbelin, he has the Luna to kill off the 1-1. Wants to draw. I'm actually really surprised.
That's the way. I've been a little bit surprised, I've got to be honest, with a couple of the turns so far from Frenetic. One being just the raw fungal on the raw Glowfly on the previous turn when he had options to go with Innovate and Blooms with Power of the Wild, maybe even wait more to one turn and pair it with Pride's Fury, right? He could have gone with 6 mana. He could have gone Glowfly, Innovate, Lightning Bloom, Pride's Fury to make a huge board of hard to remove minions. Because Glowfly Swarm just to get cleared up by 1 Immolation Aura is kind of a scary prospect in this matchup.
Yeah, I guess he just wants to make one ultimate board, right? That has just too much health, and to do that, he'll want Gibbling, Pride's Fury, and Arbor up.
Hits the Moarg. Oh, he's 0-mana Spectral Sight here as well.
I see.
Continuing to just dump cards through his deck. He cannot afford even to draw as many cards as it was possible to draw on that turn because of how congested his hand is getting.
Yeah, well, this is the turn, Sol.
This is the turn.
No Solar, though, for Frenetic, which is, I think, what he would have liked to have found in his deck by now.
As the Arbor Up is going to have to come down, but that is still a relatively innocuous board. There is a couple of draws here that can be picked up. That is neither of them. Kurtrus does clear up a little bit.
Double Kurt.
It's true, actually, yeah.
My eyes for
You will be able to clear 4 minions with this as well, because the second one not being immune actually doesn't matter that much, right? It still will be able to take the double value trade, but he does commit the second Talented Arcanist in order to just try and win the board here. And clear up 2 more minions and drop an Eye-Beam. He'd have the opportunity there to go with large tempo Moargs as well if he'd have played the turn a little bit differently, because they are genuinely discounted to 0 there off the Skull. So Philosophy into some tempo Moargs would have been a reasonable idea there as well.
And this is one of the reasons why I thought just Gibbling and then going off with the Prides was just better, because it's just more health on board, it's more likely it sticks, and then you go for the Arbor Up to actually push the damage. Because now he's got to delay the game another turn, right, while he builds this board again. You can just tell, right? He's just really missing those solar eclipses in the deck that are still 2 of in there. Like, any of these buffs with a solar eclipse would have made the game look quite different.
Oh, is that Immolation Aura off the top? That is Immolation Aura off the top. That's another huge board clear here. Hailstrike's pushing through. That's another philosophy as well. I think he just gets there on tempo now with minions after this clear.
You're paying for my discretion.
Yep. Is he going to play out?
The Moargs.
I mean, that's the big question, right?
Yeah.
Like, do the minions just get there from this point, or is he going to hold? Says he holds.
What's he even have left to hold with at this point?
It's 50-50, right? He has Raging Fell Screamer, which is the worst draw in the deck. Okay, that's the worst draw in the deck. But outside of that, there's Blood Mage that cycles, and then there's the 2 remaining combo pieces, which he needs both of. Yeah, minions are coming down this time. I'm very much of the opinion that these should have come down last turn, since they cost 0, but I think Blyze might just be a turn slow in recognizing that. But yeah, he's just building the board right now and just trying to push lethal. He is all in. Oh no!
Too little, too late for the solar eclipse there. That's Fellscream Blast. Now got 1 and 2 next turn to just draw Il'gynoth, of course.
I think he has guaranteed. Okay, now with the taunts he didn't. But even if he drew Blood Mage, he actually would have been able to go face with all the minions and then just cycle the Blood Mage with the Ethereal Org Merchant, right? And still would have had
deal 6 with the weapon.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
Not many cards.
That's Il'gynoth, which means that is lethal. Blyze takes game number 3, and he's now only the 1 game away from being our first Worlds competitor here over in the European region and making Sottle a very happy boy.
Oh, I'm a very tense boy right now, Raven. Honestly, this is a huge challenge trying to cast this series. It's being played so quickly between 2 very explosive decks in the case of that particular game that, like, I'm trying to take a moment to think about different lines. And it's so hard to do, right? Particularly with Token Druid, where it's so many like combinations of cards and mana breakpoints and what Overload means for the following turn with Lightning Bloom. And like, if Frenetic is capable of calculating all of those options in the speed that he's doing, congratulations to him, but like, I'm not able to consider all the lines in the time that he's playing his turns in, so I'm a little bit concerned about whether he is able to either. Then again, like, we've had this same question about Blyze, about Casey, about historically fast players in the past anyway, and they've kind of proven those criticisms wrong over time. So, you know, maybe we just kind of have to hold that same stance against Frenetic here. But certainly I do think he had different options that game, whether or not they're better or worse. I genuinely did not have time to evaluate.
Even this board that we just saw get cleaned up, he had the option of, instead of going Arbor up, he could have gone with the Innovate into Prides into Power of the Wild as well. So he would have had a very high health board and it would have been pretty wide anyway, and then have Arbor up. I think that was my only question, and again, I'm no Token Druid expert, right? It's not my favorite deck to just jam a few hundred games of, but I just, in my brain, can't get past the make a high health or sticky board first and then just kill him with the Arbor up damage, right? And not try and do it with Arbor up, because that makes the weakest board initially. So that's the only question I have, and I might easily be wrong on that, but we are moving into our game number 4 of the finals here, and Blyze has Weapon Rogue going up against the Druid once again from Frenetic, and this is where things might get a little bit spicy. I think both of us all have got very used to being like, oh, Weapon Rogue's got a really great matchup coming up.
Yeah.
Because we're so used to it being used as like this counter in EU against some of these slower styles, but against Token Druid, maybe not the case.
Yes, and I think Frenetic will be hoping that he hasn't used up his good Druid draws on matches that didn't matter, right? Because he's had the fungal opening both times so far this series, and it just hasn't ended up mattering because one was just a complete shutout game that, you know, nothing really mattered with the double Blade Master on the other side. The other, I think, was a very skillfully navigated game of OTK Demon Hunter on the other side from Blyze that kind of shut down the Token Druid. But if it comes to he just bricks in a matchup against Weapon Rogue, that will all be for naught, because he should steamroll this matchup.
Right.
It should be absolutely free. But if he just whiffs and draws 0 minions, 0 Glowfly throughout the entire game, that's the one way that he can really come back. But yet again, Fungal Fortunes, opening hand from Frenetic. Who am I to doubt?
With Gibberlin and Lunar Eclipse as well, so not looking too bad at all. xBlyzes doesn't have hold of a weapon yet, but he does have a decent minion opening, right? He has the One Maker, he has their Mancrick as well, so he can do stuff in the early turns. He's not just sitting and waiting for Frenetic to kill him at this point.
Ooh, double Gibberling now here from Frenetic, but he is going to rip that Fungal Fortunes. That is a ton of spells now that he can use to curve out with these Gibberlings, so there will be a very large board incoming, and still xBlyzes is short of the weapon here. He's going to get the bad news that the huge board is coming down, and I believe this is going to be a Pride's Fury dropped on the back of this as well.
Looks like it, doesn't it?
Mm-hmm.
Curving very nicely into the Arbor up next turn, and this might just be the draw Frenetic needed to recover, right? You said he's hoping he's not used up all the good openings he had as Druid, which are normally so important with the deck, and I struggle to see how xBlyzes can realistically respond to this.
Tap is certainly needed. And I think you have... Okay, that's a huge draw. Because now at this point, I think you have to... Yeah, I was going to say, it might have been tempted there to just be like, oh, Cloak of Shadows, but it wouldn't achieve anything, right? Like, he absolutely needs to find some extra turns here somewhere. And just hope that there isn't the huge buff on his opponent's side. But obviously, there is the huge buff on his opponent's side. And that is probably going to spell disaster from this point from xBlyzes. Because even with double Cloak from this point, I don't think there's any way he finds enough turns to get out of this.
That's the issue, isn't it? Like, Cloak costs 3, so that's most of his turn. He can't equip a weapon and start swinging and Cloak at the same time. It's just too much too soon. And in the blink of an eye, the series is all evened up, subtle, 2-2. To both of these players, and it's all coming down to the final matchup. It's going to be the Weapon Rogue from xBlyzes going up against the Miracle Rogue from Frenetic, and a matchup that isn't so simple. I think a lot of Weapon Rogue matchups are quite straightforward. You're either feeling good about it or you're against Token Druid, but this one a little bit trickier.
Yes, it's a little closer. It's still, I would say, a good matchup for the Miracle Rogue overall, because they're just so capable of making these annoying boards that really incentivize trading into from the Weapon Rogue on the other side, because they just add up so quickly, right? Like, 1-3-2 doesn't seem like a scary prospect. When it's added to by a second and third 3-2 on the next turn and they all start going face, that's very hard to race when all you have is a weapon on the other side. However, it's nowhere near as one-sided as what you saw. Like, as long as Druid draws a minion, like by which I mean, you know, Gibberling or the Glowfly Swarm, it's pretty hard for Rogue to find enough time to win that matchup. But from the other side, there is a little bit more wiggle room, because Rogue plays a lot of the good cards in both versions of this deck, right? Like, Prize Plunderers are huge, Swindle for resources is huge, Mancrick is huge. You know, both players do have access to those cards to be able to curve out and tempo swing early. So they are both capable of getting a grip on proceedings. Whereas in the other matchup against Token Druid, they just play tokens and you can't answer them because you just don't have the ability to. So this is a suitably much more close matchup to end the day on here, as it comes down to 2-2 in our final series. Of course, Frenetic already doing significantly better against xBlyzes than any of our other competitors over the weekend have managed to do.
Yeah, he took at least 1 game from him, and now 2. That is a lot better than anyone else has done so far. And I do echo your point as well. I think the matchup is a lot closer. And honestly, the drawback in this matchup is the fact that the weapons cost 3, right? Because that's when the deck really starts to get going. But Miracle Rogue gets going from like turn 1 a lot of the time, right, and starts doing what it wants to do straight away. So yeah, it's going to be a tough one for xBlyzes, but still a winnable one. And I'm just glad we're going down to game 5. I am more than okay, especially with the speed these two are playing at. I am happy this has been stretched out as long as possible, because I don't want it to end at this point.
Yeah. It's going to be an incredibly tense ending for sure, because I think both of these players are, you know, young and relatively inexperienced. It feels weird to say that about xBlyzes, who kind of already feels like he's done it all in terms of Hearthstone, but he is still relatively inexperienced. He's just done it in an incredibly short amount of time. So you can kind of see the emotions building up, right? And it's so weird to see a game of this level of importance played at this speed, particularly in Europe, right? Because we're so used to the big players that get through to the semifinals and the finals and play out these big important matches being the Yarlas and the Bunny Hoppers, and even then the players who aren't necessarily that slow tend to slow down when they get to this point in a tournament, right? And the magnitude really starts to dawn on them. So here we are. We just have two of the absolute new guard, two of the young blood just coming through and just saying, oh, this is just how you do it. This is just Zoomer Hearthstone 101.
Right.
You just power your way through your turns, and it's honestly been a very challenging cast so far, trying to keep up with all the action that's been going on.
And you've just got to think of what's on the line. I mean, we're not actually in the next game yet, as you can tell, and I imagine that's because both players might be just taking a minute, as there's only this one game left. But it's quite difficult as well to realize how important a win is here, because yes, it doesn't mean they just become the world champion, but they get to go, and that's the next step, right? And although we've seen players the likes of Yarla, and even any player who's made the top cut in Worlds, right? That's very impressive, but it's not winning, right? Like that, you are just such a level above if you become a world champion, right? It's something that never goes away, and just the fact that you can say you did it, you're one of the very few, even after all these years. It's not like we have hundreds of world champions, right? It's more or less, as you mentioned, one a year, and it's you part of such a small group, and especially as you mentioned, for Frenetic, for xBlyzes, this could just set them up for at least a few years, right? If they become a world champion, then naturally there's just a huge increase in following. There's an increase in all eyes being on you as the current Hearthstone world champion, and so on. So it's not even just winning like one big match, winning a tournament. It's just winning like the tournament, and the one that's going to have like a rippling effect in the future for both these players and for any of the players, of course, from any of the other regions, because it's just such a huge deal for both of them.
Yeah, no, it absolutely is, and we've heard that throughout the theme, as a theme throughout the day, where every time we've had our interviews, whenever we've aired that, it's all they talk about, right? It's I want to make Worlds, I want to win Worlds. It means so much to me to have that title of world champion next to my name. So I'm sure that is no different for any of the competitors that could have been here. But what we do have is xBlyzes versus Frenetic, and what we do have is an insane opening hand here for Frenetic.
It's pretty incredible, isn't it? I mean, a lot of the time, yes, you're looking for Octo. We've seen double Octo hands, but then you talk about, well, do you actually throw one? Because if you've got nothing good to reduce, then it's pointless. This, field contact, Foxy Fraud, even Secret Passage to cover over a turn, the One Thief, fine. Outside of a Swindle off the top, like, this is probably the ultimate opening hand in pretty much any matchup. xBlyzes, on the other hand, hasn't got hold of a weapon yet, but has got that man crick. He's going to, by the looks of it, prot the Octo, and already head's going down a little bit because he knows he's had to prot this Octo. There's a decent chunk of cards in hand for Frenetic, and no weapon in sight for xBlyzes, and Frenetic is about to go off.
It's just going to be a full board of minions. Like I said, that this matchup has more game in it because they can't just make a full board of 2/2s right at the start of the game. Well, guess what? They have one specific draw where that does happen, and Frenetic has hit exactly that here, and that is pretty much game over at this point. As sad as that is to say from xBlyzes, there is so little chance that he comes back from this point.
And I'll tell you what, I don't know what Frenetic's feeling right now, because on camera he seems very calm. But if you ever need one game of Hearthstone to have the God opening, it's the one that will get you to the World Championship. Absolutely huge here for Frenetic, and the Kazakus on curve. Multiple options now of not only Golem, but just what to do next turn, as we see Taunt summon a copy.
I was a little surprised that he took 5 there. I was kind of eyeing 1, because you could then coin it out this turn. If you get like +1/+1 as a buff, that's great. And then you still have like Mancrit, Cult Neophyte next turn. Cult Neophyte is incredibly powerful against this version of the deck. But xBlyzes, on the other hand, just rips the Secret Passage, hits absolutely nothing. This is just one of those decks in Weapon Rogue that just looks a bit stupid when it falls apart like this.
And just look at Frenetic. He saw the cloak, and I think he knows. There's no weapon down. He's now got double 5-drop Taunt in hand. He has Neophyte. He's got Shadow Step to be flexible with. He's even got Alex if it even remotely gets that far to end the game. And I think he's just realizing that this could just be it. xBlyzes finally gets hold of the weapon, can deal with an amount of damage on board, but this just might be too much. Is that going to be a step onto the Golem? Yeah, just a replay, get 2 more taunts. What else have you got, xBlyzes? Insane opening, insane draws, and insane play from Frenetic. There's just nothing he can do, Soto.
There is nothing, and that means the aggressive lineup from Frenetic is going to find its way out of this. There's a couple of draws here from xBlyzes. He still has an attack. He still has a coerce. He still has immunity on his weapon as well. But even this attack is going to summon a water elemental that potentially freezes out his face here. Does now have mana for Cloak of Shadows #2. But having now used Cloak of Shadows #2, this means xBlyzes has to kill his opponent next turn from 24.
Which I'm going to throw it out there. Seems unlikely.
Yeah, I would agree.
Yeah, and Frenetic, even though he's so far ahead, just doing the due diligence, right? Okay, what problems could I possibly face in this crazy game? Let's just double Neophyte, lock out the big playoffs or the big payoff turns, you know, the whole like double cutting class craziness that could happen, and maybe that leads to an issue somewhere down the line. So Frenetic gets the double. Now, what's that triple Neophyte going to come down now?
Yep. To
completely lock out even the craziest hope that xBlyzes could possibly have here. I think that's just 100% guaranteed, and I don't even think Frenetic can believe it.
I love that he's still nervous.
Yeah.
Like, he's still just like, oh no, how can this go wrong?
You've not won until you've won.
This turn?
There's a hit. Double prep, absolutely nothing. And that's just not going to be enough.
Yeah.
Oh, xBlyzes has quit out, I believe.
In the most xBlyzes way possible. That is, I am certain, a deliberate disconnect from xBlyzes, essentially functioning as a concede from the series, and my heart goes out to him. It's a brutal way to lose the series, but at the same time, it's very cruel to Frenetic, who has to sit and wait to get confirmation from the admin, I suppose, that xBlyzes has left the series. But we will soon get to bless him with that good news that he is, in fact, the winner of this series.
Yep, I imagine admin is messaging Frenetic right now just to tell him that yes, you're okay, you can leave the game, you've won. That was a concede disconnect from xBlyzes. And again, like you mentioned, I do understand the frustration at that point where you play almost 1.5 no games in the end there, but that's the game, that's the lineup choice, that's the position you've potentially put yourself in as well, with having, you know, like I said, the one thing I loved about Frenetic's lineup going into today and going into this week was that everyone appeared to almost like agree on, let's go as greedy as possible, let's out-greed the greed. And Frenetic said, okay, enjoy that plan. I'm just going to kill you in the first 5 turns of the game. Enjoy your greed. And he's paid off. I think the lineup choice was close to perfect for him here.
Certainly done very well. It's a good meta read, right? And even if you have opinions on decks in a vacuum, like Token Druid, for example, you have to accept that they do have a role in a particular lineup against a particular strategy coming out from the opponent. If you expect just insane greed, then yeah, Glowflight Swarm, Soul of the Forest, Gibberling, all that kind of stuff, they're insane cards to punish that level of greed from your opponent. If they're just filling their deck full of these late game win conditions and clunky mid-range minions, then suddenly your ability to get underneath that is very well done. And really, you know, across all of GM, there really hasn't been anyone else who has gone with a similar strategy to what Frenetic has done.